It's time for Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock.
Believe me when I say we have a difficult time ahead of us. But if we are to be prepared for it, we must first shed our fear of it. I stand here without fear because I remember that I am here not because of the path that lies before me, but because of the path that lies behind me. I remember that for 100 years we have fought these machines. And after a century of war, I remember that which matters most. We are still here! Tonight, let us make them remember we are not afraid! No fear here on Declare Your Independence with me, Ernest Hancock, each and every day here in Phoenix, Arizona, from the farm of Freedoms with an S, freedomsphoenix.com. Now, we have a gentleman, Jesse Freeston, is on in Honduras right now. Now, he is a video journalist. Now, he's covered quite a bit of material, and we're playing on for the video crowd. You'll see The Real News, therealnews.com. There is a film up there. It looks like it's in HD. That's showing, big crowds. There's a lot going on in Honduras. We've been covering it over the last few months, and I want to get a perspective from Jesse. Now, he's covered a lot of different issues, including the military-industrial complex, from Washington, of course, and, its economic fallout here in this country. He's talked about the Arizona immigration laws here. He did some stuff on that. Steelworkers strike at the world's largest nickel mine in Canada. March 2009 election in El Salvador. So now he's in Honduras. And I got to go, Jesse, help me out, man. What are you doing in Honduras?
All right. First, that was quite an inspiring kickoff to an interview. Probably the best one I've heard yet, the fighting the machines. So I'm here in Honduras. I'm in the capital of Tegucigalpa right now. I've been here for since February this time around, covering sort of the fallout, the aftermath of military coup that took place in June 2009.
Hey, wait a minute. You're starting to lose you. What were you?
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I said, yes, I'm not sure where you lost me, but I'm here in Tegucigalpa. I'm in the capital of Honduras, and I've been here for about 4 months this time around, covering the fallout of the June 2009 military coup.
Okay, now let's go ahead and let's talk about that real quick. We've done it before for the audience. They have no idea what you're talking. Honduras is where on the map? They have no idea. What countries are around it? What influences do they have? What factions are arguing over what? And where are we now? Go ahead and do it up, man.
All right, here we go. We'll try and keep this as brief as possible. So Honduras, if you going south from Arizona, you hit Mexico first, then Guatemala, and then you hit Honduras. So we're talking about a neighbor of the southern United States. Honduras's population is mostly mestizo, a mix of the indigenous people that lived here before and the Spanish colonizers that came over, with certain other groups, indigenous groups that retain their identities, and groups like the Garifuna, who are escaped African slaves who mixed with indigenous from the Caribbean. They have their own long story. Anyway, so Honduras today is essentially coming out of a situation where they've had 30 years of representative democracy, a two-party state where two parties that really have very little differences that anybody was ever able to identify, and traded power back and forth, none of which ever really providing any solutions to the problems that have plagued Hondurans for 30 years. Namely, those problems that still exist today, 80% of the population living in poverty, at least 300,000 families, rural families without access to land that want it. That doesn't count the who knows how many hundreds of thousands of families that are now living outside of Honduras, the majority of which living in the United States, who had to leave basically as economic refugees. And in that situation, you've seen a movement arise over the last few years to try and move to a more participatory democracy. And what that means for them, in the first place, is rewriting their constitution, because their current constitution was written under U.S.-backed military dictatorship in the early 1980s. This constitution really has strong language defending representative democracy that they've had, and a number of the problems that persist in the country. So the idea was to bring together every sector of the country, to bring together the workers, to bring together the women's rights groups, to bring together the farmers, the teachers, the students, bring together representatives of all the different sectors, and refound Honduras with a new founding document, and have a constitution that reflects Honduras's needs, not the needs of whichever needs were being availed for by the U.S. Embassy in 1980 or by the Honduran elite or traditional political ruling class that wrote the document in 1980 without consulting any other groups. So this was the idea. That idea was finally championed for the first time by a Honduran politician who was president at the time, Manuel Zelaya. When they tried to bring this to fruition, the Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal, that they weren't allowed to hold a referendum on whether or not to rewrite the Constitution. So what they did was they announced they would hold a non-binding referendum just to gauge the public opinion on whether or not it was a good idea to rewrite the Constitution. On the day that was supposed to happen, the military overthrew the president that morning, using that vote as a pretext, and sent him in his pajamas to Costa Rica. Ever since then, there's been a massive resistance movement that's arisen from all those groups that were going to get a say in that new constitution, and they've formed this broad-based resistance movement that now has committees and assemblies going on in every one of Honduras's 298 municipalities. And since then, have undergone an incredible amount of political repression by the military, by the police, and by the government that took over during the military coup. So we've seen over 100 political dissidents assassinated. There's over 200 that have been forced into exile that are currently living outside the country, until recently, including the overthrown leader who just came back last week, as well as thousands of illegal detentions that have been documented by human rights groups both inside and outside the country. And a general impunity across all of that. So not only was everybody that was involved in the coup already given amnesty, total amnesty for their crimes under the current regime, but also there's been very little, if not any, examples of anybody being brought to justice for any of these assassinations that I just mentioned, or any of the detentions, or any of the rapes by police officers of female participants in the protests, and various other violations and crimes that have been documented.
Okay.
So a state of impunity from the top to the bottom, from those that overthrew the president to those that have been killing landless farmers.
I have a lot of questions and some observations, and we're going to walk through it. And I appreciate that. That was very good. But I'm looking at a situation to where the people rose up, made it very clear that the status quo is not going to be accepted. And on the eve of the vote, for them to demonstrate that, boom, this seemingly other entity, the military, the people with the guns, come in and say, you know what, Mr. President, you're out of here. Now we rule. We've taken over. We're starting over. And and by the way, we've given amnesty to everybody that did anything wrong here because we got the shiny badge to do so. And as if that matters. And you go, all right, nobody's going to be prosecuted. Nobody's going to be done anything, but we're in charge now. And we're going to start over. And then we're going to have pinky swear. We promise we're going to go ahead and have you guys come together, have an election, give your preferences. And during all of this, as people are talking and starting to organize and such, there are still the targeting of opposition leaders to the original government. That's pretty much where we're at now, right?
Exactly. So so 4 or 5 months after the coup, in November of 2009, they had these elections that you just referred to. And these elections were used. So to back up just a second. So right after the coup, every single country in the world, either through the United Nations or through the OAS, voted to oppose the coup, and so they would not recognize the government that came out of the coup. Then there were elections that were already pre-scheduled for November, and then that's when the United States, Canada, and various other countries decided they would recognize these elections as a way to get out of the crisis.
Did they have the elections?
They went ahead and had the elections.
Okay, now that's where we're bringing it back. They're going to push the button on me. We'll be right back here on Declare Your Independence with Jesse Freeston in just a little bit. They finally had elections. What happened then in Honduras? We're going to the southern part